joined by our next guest, David Miliband, who is the CEO of the International Rescue Committee. David, nice to see you.
Thank you for having me.
One thing I know that's been on your mind is multilateralism versus, I guess, bilateralism or unilateralism. And the world used to be multilateral, much more than it is today. Why is that a loss, David?
So we're a global humanitarian agency. We're at the sharp end of the crisis of diplomacy. The wars that are long-standing in Afghanistan and elsewhere, the more recent conflicts in Syria, we're there on the front line delivering healthcare and education. And we can see that these wars are lasting longer, they're more virulent, there's more war crimes. And that speaks to, I think, the central theme of Davos this week. A lot of national politicians talking about their own country, a lot of global problems for a more connected world without the kind of connected politics that we need. And we can all see that we're storing up problems for the future, and that future is coming towards us very fast.
But can't, Putin and Trump just solve Syria together?
Well, they could do a hell of a job together than they're doing separately, but they're not. We've got a series of unilateral moves. Right. It's a great example. I've got people in Idlib in the northwest of Syria today. There's bombing going on. In the northeast, you know that President Trump decided to give the green light to the Turkish incursion, depending on your preference, however you describe it. Series of unilateral moves. Who's left out? The poor people of Syria. Yeah. 23 million population, 500,000 dead, 6 million refugees, 8 million homeless inside the country. That's the price of a series of unilateral actions and a crisis of diplomacy that leaves this war still burning.
Yeah, speaking of unilateral, you were a member of the UK Parliament for, I think it was 12 years. Yeah. I'd love your thoughts on Brexit and the big victory that Boris Johnson enjoyed there.
Well, Brexit is going to happen. The referendum was in 2016. We know that we're going to formally leave the European Union. We're checking out of the EU hotel. But no British citizen, I'm one, we don't know what hotel we're checking into. There are years of negotiations ahead of us. Even if the tight deal that the Prime Minister and the government are trying to negotiate this year is done, we know there's a long way to go before business can have the kind of certainty it needs.
Are you optimistic, though, about the future?
Well, I never like to talk down my country. I was very strongly against Brexit, and I fear that we are condemning ourselves to having to recreate systems of politics and security and foreign policy that we're pulling out of. And on the economic front, we're just making life more difficult for us. We know that Europe is more than half of our exports. We know it's 2/3 of our total trade. You don't make that up easily. And the more you impose cost, especially for our manufacturing sector, the tougher it's going to be. So we're starting to walk up a down escalator. That's a really tough situation for any business person in the UK.
Would you ever go back and run for office in the UK?
Well, I'm really lucky. I'm an ex-politician. I was foreign minister for 3 years. I'm now running a global humanitarian charity. But I'm 54. People tell me 54 is not the new 64, it's the new 44. So I don't know what I'm going to do next.
Sir Patrick Stewart thinks you should be running things. Well, the actor from Star Trek, right?
He's a great man. He's a great man and a great friend, so I'm lucky.
Trump actually, in his speech here, said that he wants to move forward with a trade deal very quickly with the UK. Are you optimistic there?
Well, what we'll see is that there's an American version of the trade deal, and then there's British preferences for the trade deal. You know that EU-American trade has been stalled over the agriculture issue. We're going to find the same issues arising when it comes to British-American negotiations, because the truth is that the British way of life in all sorts of ways has built into it a European set of regulations. Chlorinated chicken, the way the National Health Service works. This isn't going to be done quickly.
David, let me ask you about the role of the private sector in your work. And you're seeing the power of these companies, whether it's JP Morgan or Google or Amazon. And some people suggest that maybe they're too powerful. They certainly can play a role in the work you do. What's your take on that?
My take is that governments are in retreat from big problems. So NGOs like mine, private sector companies that are much more powerful than I am, 69 of the 100 largest entities in the world are not countries, they're companies.
Yeah.
It's up to us, the NGOs and the private sector, to step up to these big global problems. And I won't go into all the details, but we're trying to solve complex long-term humanitarian problems with short-term grants. That's not going to work. We need the private sector with us to show there are solutions if you're willing to take a multi-year perspective, if you're willing to invest, and I really mean that word, invest, in the people who are on the front line. That's what we're trying to do.
All right, David Miliband, you're in the right place to do it.
Trying.
CEO of the International Rescue Committee, thanks for spending time with us.